standardized tools to conduct outreach and behavior change activities that address specific needs of vulnerable patients could further enhance their efficiency. With this objective, we developed a package of tools for frontline workers to improve the overall impact of TB programs. The intervention design of the USAID funded THALI program aims to improve access to services and patient treatment outcomes in three South Indian states with high TB burden. We targeted outreach and communication package for frontline workers to efficiently promote behaviors such as timely testing among vulnerable communities and treatment adherence among patients. This package involves microplanning, patient risk and needs assessment, and patient specific behavior change strategies through visual tools and counseling skills. Microplanning refers to the process of identification, assessing, prioritizing, and documenting the needs of the community in any given focus area. These focus areas are identified to have a high concentration of communities that are potentially at a greater risk of developing TB than others. Microplanning helps to plan outreach activities of the project that build efficient mechanisms for service delivery and sustain behavioral impact among the communities in these areas. This process is intended to support the FLWs to develop outreach plans and activities for each of their areas of operation. The objectives of microplanning are to define the focus area for the frontline workers in the given geography, to develop a detailed understanding of the focus area and the microscopy center area for planning the frontline workers' outreach activities, and to support the frontline workers in developing comprehensive patient-centered care, support, and communication plan on a monthly basis for every TB patient and their families to ensure positive treatment outcomes. Microplanning tools include the tuberculosis unit map, cluster map, or a designated microscopy center map, and a focus area map. Risk and needs analysis form was designed to be an easy to use tool to help the FLWs create a profile of the TB patient during interactions at the time of diagnosis or treatment initiation and assess the risks which could hinder successful treatment outcomes. The RANA form, once filled, creates a multidimensional profile of the patient which can help the frontline worker personalize a care and support approach based on the person's medical history as well as psychosocial and financial circumstances. The RANA categorizes patients into one or more of high risk categories, guiding the frontline workers on providing specialized care and support packages developed for each vulnerable group. The behavior change communication material development was a multi-stage systematic process designed to incorporate a range of inputs from multiple stakeholders involved in TB control efforts in order to get a grassroots level perspective on patient behavior and synthesize it into visually compelling material with sound messaging. The BCC materials cover a wider variety of topics along the continuum of care, starting from perception of symptoms to the use of visuals and minimal text mean that the BCC materials cannot be used as standalone materials. The involvement of a CHW or other frontline worker is necessary for the optimal use of the material. The training was comprehensive, not only teaching them what the materials are about, but how to effectively use them and respond according to the diagnosis of TB as well as health seeking and treatment adherence. Some of the PCC materials address particular risk groups within the larger TB patient population, including alcohol users and smokers, and specifically address their needs. The BCC materials also cover topics that are often overlooked during a patient's care, such as stigma and disclosure and healthy food habits to hasten one's recovery. This package helped the frontline workers to implement the personalized community engagement in the field by offering customized care approach to the patients based on their risk and vulnerability assessment. The outreach approach resulted in an increase in the proportion of people being tested after receiving referrals from 58.1% to 85.3% in a span of 2 years. The patient centered SPCC approach helped increase the rate of successful treatment completion for patients from 84.27% to 92.96% in the same time period. The learning generated from developing a targeted approach to outreach and communication was a shift from generalized awareness generation to a personalized patient centered communication led to a better health seeking behaviors among the communities vulnerable to TB, as seen in the above results of the implementation of this program. The overall quality of interactions between the FLWs and the community can be enhanced through the co-creation of outreach strategies with FLWs, developing easy to use visual tools which are interactive and drawing upon the local know-how and strength of the communities. This package demonstrated success for potential adoption and scale up through the National TB program. Thales Outreach and Communication Package is flexible and scalable. There is a scope to integrate this package into the existing program for scale up to other states of India. A personalized approach to outreach and patient support through an empowered frontline will help India realize its vision to end TB in the country by 2025. And such an approach to outreach and patient support will go a long way in meeting the targets. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Purnima. I can already see a lot of interest and questions coming in the chat as well. Thank you so much, Purnima. I think it was really fascinating to see this, the customized and targeted outreach and behavior change health program that you took us through. I'd like to remind the audience members to please put in their questions as the presentations are going on, but we'll be able to take them all at the end of the entire session because we have two more presentations and we're giving about 10 minutes to each of the presenters. With that, I'll move us into the second session, the second paper of this session, please, which is on triangulating the strengthened capacity. This talks about strengthening the government capacity for delivering SBCC health programs by triangulating multiple researchers to assess change across levels, individual level, organization level, as well as at the system level. I'd like to first introduce Lokesh Bhatt, who has joined us from Nepal. And it'll be his pre-recorded presentation that we will all listen into. And Lokesh is here with us to answer any questions. Lokesh is a monitoring and evaluation specialist who is currently working as M&D manager at ECPAT Luxembourg. The presentation is based on Breakthrough Action's System Strengthening Project in Nepal, which was implemented by Johns Hopkins University Center for Communication Programs, JHU CCP. Really looking forward to this presentation, Lokesh. Can I please request Aseem or Sohini to put the recording on, please, for us?
Yes, just please give us a minute. I'll just...
Sure.
Hello everyone, Namaste. I will be sharing learnings from Breakthrough Action Nepal System Strengthening Project. I will talk about using triangulation to assess changes in social and behavior change capacity using multiple research methods. Here, I would like to acknowledge my colleagues who contributed to the abstract. Joy Hendrickson, Pranav Rajbhandari, Srijana Kesi, Trish Ann Davis, Leticia De Los Rios, and Sanjanthi Velu. When we assess changes results from more than one point of view, using multiple methods or multiple sources, actually we are confirming the results by triangulating the findings, by triangulating the information. Now the question is, why do we need triangulation and why? There are situations when direct measurements of the changes is difficult. it is hard to draw a conclusion and document changes that occurred due to our interventions. Particularly, when we talk about evaluating SBC capacity strengthening interventions, there are limited approaches that exist to measure capacity change. In such interventions, there are uncertain cause and effect relationships, so it becomes challenging to claim upon results of our interventions using only one evaluation approach. Thus, triangulation improves the quality of M&E works, increases the credibility of the results, and makes the results more reliable. To set the context, I would like to talk about the Breakthrough Action Nepal SBC System Strengthening Project. It was supported by USAID funds and with a duration of 2 years in 2018 to 2020. The project's objective was to strengthen the institutional and technical capacity of the government of Nepal to design, implement, evaluate, and coordinate effective social and behavior change programs. The SBC capacity ecosystem was the guiding approach. So we first identified SBC capacities and gaps, and then secondly, co-designed interventions to strengthen competencies for capacity at system level, organization level, and the individual level. Our primary focus was local municipality capacity strengthening. Interventions included human-centered design-guided interventions, along with collaborative learning and adaptations with the government of Nepal, stakeholders, especially the local municipalities. 3 different evaluation approaches were used to assess changes. The first approach was SBC capacity self-assessment by key stakeholders at 3 government tiers, federal level, provincial, and local level. We used both quantitative and qualitative approaches for the self-assessment. Self-assessment scores were compared between baseline and endline for key identified SBC capacity domains and subdomains, and which was supplemented by a qualitative in-depth interview with key stakeholders. The second approach was most significant change. We conducted key informant interviews with stakeholders at the municipal, province, and federal levels. A set of open-ended questions were asked to gather stories about changes they noticed or identified during the project period. Then the stories were vetted and scored by the local and province level stakeholders through participatory workshops to select the most significant change stories from all collected stories. The third approach was outcome harvesting. To evaluate project accomplishments, a post hoc qualitative evaluation technique was used known as outcome harvesting. Outcome harvesting is a complexity-aware methodology that is particularly useful when evaluating capacity strengthening projects, considering their complex theories of change, as well as projects being implemented in settings characterized by uncertainty. This evaluation was carried out by external evaluators. For outcome harvesting, an outcome is defined as a positive or negative change that occurred in the behavior of a system, organization, or key individual. The outcome harvesting process worked backward to identify and verify outcomes at the end of the project through an in-depth document review and key informant interviews with stakeholders at the federal, province, and local levels. After drafting potential outcomes based on internal external documentations, and then the evaluation team worked backward to clarify the specific contribution of the project to each outcome. All outcomes in the final list were both internally and externally verified. Let's talk about key evaluation results. Results of SBC capacity self-assessment evaluation reflect increased overall self-assessment score from baseline to endline at province and local level. Increased scores were noticed across key SBC capacity self-assessment subdomains such as knowledge management, coordination, and collaboration for SBC programming at province and local level. Among the 22 most significant change stories collected and then 10 selected by key stakeholders as most significant, participants emphasized an increased knowledge and understanding of SBC with an emphasis on how to identify community needs and target groups for interventions. Common across stories was the acknowledgement of the importance of situation analysis and interactions with communities to inform program design. Institutional changes identified in the most significant change stories included greater prioritization of SPC activities in annual planning and budgeting at local level. Evidence gathered and verified as part of this qualitative outcome harvesting evaluation provided multiple examples of contributions that the project made in influencing capacity shifts among its primary beneficiaries and other SBC partners. In particular, government stakeholders at federal, province, and local levels demonstrated numerous ways in which they gained capacity in designing, supporting, and implementing evidence-based SBC and fostering multisectoral collaboration to address their community's needs. These changes reflected multiple dimensions of SBC capacity and mapped onto the competencies targeted by Breakthrough Action Nepal SBC System Strengthening Project. So in conclusion, with the combination of these three distinct quantitative and qualitative approaches to measure SBC capacity and evaluate capacity strengthening activities, the project was able to access invaluable sources of qualitative and quantitative data that informed us the changes in programmatic interventions, activities, scale-up, and sustainability strategies. Multiple methods enabled data triangulation, with findings also eliminating the weaknesses of using one approach independently. Learnings from this integration will be useful for future projects aiming to measure and evaluate rigorously capacity strengthening activities to improve social behavior change programs for health. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this, Lokesh. And I think the the robust methodologies that you've taken us all through, as well as the rigorous methods, the triangulation. I'm a big fan of triangulation of research methods, so it's just amazing to see such great work. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions from the audience members as well. Thanks, Purnima, also for answering the questions as they come on the chat box, and we'll it'll be great if there are more questions on Lokesh's paper too. With that, I would like to now move us into the last and the third presentation for today before we get into the Q&A. The third paper for the session is called Care Companion Platform. It's a paper that talks about developing a WhatsApp-based health behavior change messaging platform to encourage healthy behaviors. Before taking us into the pre-recorded session, I'd like to quickly introduce two co-authors of this paper, Victoria, who is a design strategist with Noura Health. She comes from a clinical and community social work background with a strong passion to serve society. She's joined by Shirley, who is a behavior change specialist at Noura Health, where she identifies ways in which behavior change shows up in the design, research, and evaluation of Noura Health's services and interventions. Over to you, Aseem and Sohini, to please share the presentation. Thank you.
Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am Victoria. I'm a design strategist from Noura Health. Today, I'll be talking about the use of WhatsApp with Digital Care Companion and using technology to motivate behavior change. Are you wondering what this picture is? This is a common scene across India or across South Asia where family members are sitting outside waiting for their loved ones to be discharged. Because in India, patients get very less time to converse with doctor while getting discharged, approximately 2.5 minutes per patient or lesser than that. And they get very rushed information about what to do at home after discharge, what medication they have to take, steps to come for the follow-up checkups, etc., which still leaves the patients and caregivers with a lot of doubts and unanswered questions. With this situation, they need to have a strong support system which helps them with reminders, informations, and encourage key evidence-based healthy behavior to ensure speedy and healthy recovery. Given this increasingly digital health landscape, there are opportunities to use platforms such as WhatsApp, which can provide information when families need it the most for greater impact at scale and sustained behavior change. So we at Noora Health educate family members by creating engaging content and train the government nurses to go back and train caregivers and patients in the hospitals. And part of this program, we have Digital Care Companion service, which connects families to a mobile support system to receive health content and have questions answered at home. So here is a picture that shows how the Care Companion program is conducted in the hospitals. So in this picture, a nurse has converted the corridors into the hallways to teach the health behavior lessons to the caregivers and the patients in the hospitals. And part of this, we have Digital Care Companion program. As I had mentioned earlier, part of the Digital Care Companion program, we have the Digital Care Companion WhatsApp service, which onboards users by just a missed call. So Digital Care Companion service aims to promote healthy practices and health-seeking behavior by providing continued care when families leave the hospital and return to their communities after the discharge. So this is a slide that explains how the users are onboarded to the service. So users after the Care Companion program in the hospital will be given with the phone number which is dedicated to their hospital state and condition area. Once they give the phone number, they have to give missed call to that particular phone number. Once the missed call is given, they will be sent a SMS to acknowledge their missed call, telling, hey, thank you for giving missed call, we'll be sending you a message onto your WhatsApp. So immediately after this message, within a minute, they will also receive messages onto their WhatsApp, which starts a Care Companion digital WhatsApp service. We serve for India and Bangladesh, and in India we serve for 6 different condition areas, like for example COVID-19, women who are pregnant, mothers who are delivered, mothers who have sick newborns, and general inpatient plus cardiology. And we give information to them in their local Indian languages. And we also serve in Bangladesh for COVID-19, which was started during the start of the pandemic, which gives information to give awareness to the general public in Bangladesh about COVID-19. Here is a slide that shows the different partners who are helping us to run the service smoothly. For example, Exital is a system where accepts thousands of missed calls at the same time, and Texted helps us to schedule messages to users, and Turn helps us to send messages to users WhatsApp, and also helps us to answer all the questions that patients ask us, and which is also a back-end interface for us. So this slide shows how patients ask questions to us, and if you see, there are different examples on the slide which shows patients ask us questions through just a picture. Sometimes even patients ask us questions with just a voice note or just a video of the problem that they are having on a baby's skin or the problem area, or they would also send us a simple text message in their own Indian local languages. And we send back the message to them. We have medical experts at the back end who timely responds to all these questions in the local languages that they are comfortable with. Again, this is a slide showing the categories of the questions that get asked to us. So there are different categories that are being asked to us, and here is the detailed of the categories that are mentioned on mothers who are delivered and on a baby care. So here is an example of how the question get asked to us. So once there was a family who asked us that they're hearing a weird noise when baby is breathing, and what they have to do, and they don't know what to do. So our medical experts who are at the back end sent them the message immediately telling, thanks for asking these questions, and you've come to the right place. And they told them that this is a warning sign of a medical condition. Can you take the baby to the hospital immediately? And patients like mother and father of the baby rushed to the hospital immediately, and after coming to home they sent us the feedback telling, thank you for giving this information in a timely manner. We had taken the baby to the hospital, and the doctor told that it was a dust allergy, and because of you, we were able to take the baby to the hospital, and the doctor had mentioned that it is a treatable and baby will be all right. And they're also told that Noora Health's program is nice. So yeah, this is the other wards that we have in India, which is dedicated for COVID-19, which was started during the start of the pandemic. And we started this service to disseminate information and to give awareness about COVID-19 to the Indian population. This line was also helpful to disseminate the materials that was created by Noora Health to all our partners and the communities that we work with. The service also had the option of requesting a callback if the patients are in quarantine or they were COVID positive, and if they don't know what they have to do, we had medical experts at the back end helping them what they have to do and what next steps they have to do. And this service was launched in English and other Indian local languages and helped people to receive information in the language that they are comfortable with. So the content was created in different forms to disseminate to the Indian population. For example, it was created in text, it was created in audio format, we had some digital infographics that we had created. We also created some videos in-house. So all of this information was given to the users through this bot. So now let me quickly take you through some of the impacts that we have made. We have reached around 66,500 plus families, and we've sent across 1.6 million messages to the families and caregivers. And we've also answered around 20,000 queries that was asked by families and caregivers. And among 66,500 families who have reached to us, around 25 to 35% of people keep engaging with us on a monthly basis. Through the last 3 years, we've been coming across a lot of challenges and we've been learning a lot of lessons. Amongst them, some of the key lessons that I would highlight here is crafting messages. Because in India, we see diverse population, we need to definitely consider the population health practices that they have, the tone of voice that we are addressing to, and the character limit of a message that we need to send, and the frequency of the message that we wanted to send to the families and caregivers, and the timing of the message that we need to send the message to them was very important for us to consider while crafting the messages. And secondly, phone sharing is also one of the important aspects that we need to consider, because in India, not all the individual in a family has smartphones, whereas in rural area, there's one family member who's the head of the family, who's a male figure of the family, has phones, and not the other individual in the family has phones with them. So it was very important to us to consider that, because health information not only needs to be clinically appropriate, but it also to be designed to motivate the receivers to relay it to be beneficiaries. And the third one that I would also highlight is resilient backend for smooth message delivery and user experience, which ultimately helps build trust with families, because the timely we respond to them, the timely they receive the message and take appropriate action that they have to take because of the medical condition they are in, which helps us to gain more trust and helps us to have smoother service. Thank you to everyone who were involved in building this service from the start.
Thank you. Thanks, Victoria. Thanks, Shirley. I think it's great to see how communication programs delivered in hospital settings and in partnership with government health systems and family members can encourage desired health behaviors and better health outcomes. Thank you so much to all the presenters. I think these were all fascinating, really fascinating work and amazing presentations. I see a lot of interest in, all three presentations, and I would like to just, Purnima, if we can hear from you, because I see there are questions from Ragini and Durba on a lot of interest in the communication plan. So if we can start with, you kind of elaborating a little bit on how the government functionaries were involved for tools development. And do you want to, just talk us through that? Because I see that you also answered some questions in the chat. But, the communication tools you mentioned were customized for some, But if you want to just talk us through how this was done, that'll be great. Thanks. Purnima? You're on mute if you're trying to say.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Am I audible? Okay. There's a little bit of delay because of the internet connection. So thanks for asking the question. See, main thing that we do at KHPT is we never do parallel programs. We always work with the government. So all our projects are based out of government facilities itself, and due to that, there is also a very good rapport with the government functionaries. So during the development of these tools, there were a series of workshops that were done to understand the nitty-gritties of how what the patient really wants from the patient's perspective, the caregiver's perspective, and also from the provider's perspective. So these workshops were a mix of all these stakeholders consisting of patients, caregivers, and we also invited a lot of cartoonists to draw the pictures there itself, because when they go back, the idea may get even diluted. So we involved a lot of government functionaries from the beginning till the development of all these tools. And even while piloting, we piloted them in the government facilities themselves and with the government patients themselves. And even after the pilot, the feedback was again consolidated through these workshops and the improvisations were done. So I mean, government has been always an active part in all our interventions, and they are our major stakeholders. So, I mean, it was really convenient for us to work in that way, so that it directly caters to what the population, what the community, patient community really wants. Hope I have answered the question.
Yeah, I think so, pretty aptly. Thanks. Just Purnima, if you can also, Bhavani Shankar had also asked a related question. When you talk about targeted, customized communication, were the FLWs trained to answer personal concerns? How did you go about doing it? So if you want to just also address that, and then I'll move to Lokesh.
Yes, we train the FLWs, especially on the counseling skills and how to use the BCC materials, because BCC materials were customized for a vulnerable population. For example, for alcoholics, there was a special kind of BCC material. For the people who are living alone, they need a lot of caregiving in TB, and to be given meals on time, medication on time. There are several other related factors. So each communication of FLW with the patient, it differs. We had a series of trainings for them on counseling skills as well as using BCC. And these trainings also not only for FLWs, we also included the TB-HVs from the government for this training.
Right. Thanks for that, Purnima. Lokesh, are you there? Are you able to answer the questions, Lokesh?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thanks. So there's a question from Sonal Chaudhary where she's asking, on output harvesting. Could you please give an example on how this was done? Thanks.
Okay, sure. Okay, thanks for your concern. So it's qualitative method, right? Qualitative evaluation method. So it basically works backward. You have it is based on looking your outcomes, looking your results through your documentations. I mean, you go through your reports, documents to identify your outcomes first, results first. Then you point out at what point or at what time it happened. Then you talk or you discuss with your stakeholders, right, about your outcome, and you verify based on your list of outcomes. I mean, you verify whether it happened due to your project or not. So you verify with your stakeholders on your listed outcome, and then after that you can say that your project or your effort, your action contributed to your change, to your results. So that's how it works.
Right. It's mainly attribution, but through call and through, walking backwards from outcomes to activities and inputs. Great. Thanks, Lokesh. Right. I wanted to ask you a question on, because when you work on triangulation, there's of course triangulation from different sources. There's quant data, there's system generated data, there's qualitative data. What were
Yeah.
some of the challenges that you faced and how did you overcome that? I mean, it'll be important for, I think, this audience to kind of know for broader learnings. Yeah, if you can just talk us through some challenges and how did you address it? Thanks.
I think the biggest one is engagement, right? Engagement with your stakeholders. That was the biggest one. I mean, you have to use multiple methods at different points, right? Different points of your project. So the engagement and sorry, the effort you are putting on mobilizing your team and working with your team. That's another one. While while doing triangulation with different approaches, like we used 3 different approaches: the qualitative and quantitative type self-assessment, SPC capacity self-assessment. Then we went for most significant change methods. So again, you work with different level of stakeholders, like we have federal, province, and the local level stakeholders. So going through all level stakeholders, talking with them, verifying your efforts, verifying your outcomes, results, and compiling all those, their views, all those. I mean, mobilizing your team and field trip and all those. Those were all challenging part. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm sure Bhavani Shankar would be, connecting with you after this session. I would request the
Oh, yeah, so,
presenters to leave their email IDs on the chat because there is a lot of interest in your work, Lokesh. Thank you so much. Victoria, are you there to take up some questions?
Yes, I'm here.
Thanks, Victoria. So I think there is, a question from Durba Gogia, which is on: is the WhatsApp platform used as a chatbot with preset questions, or does it solicit open-ended questions as well?
So
Thanks.
it is the chatbot that is open-ended question. So we have MSCs that is a trained nurses sitting at the back end who answer each and every question that comes to that comes from the patients and caregivers. So it's a very diverse question that we get from the 5 different states of India right now, and in different languages. So every question is being addressed by a human sitting at the back end of the system.
Can you also talk us through some of the commonly asked questions? There's, again, a lot of interest in that as well. Thanks.
Yes, definitely. So some of the commonly asked questions are for mother and child care is burping. So the first question I would say is burping, because not everybody thinks that the burping is important, but whereas when we go to the homes of the families, the one common question that get asked is, my baby is vomiting, and because of vomiting, my baby is not able to breathe properly. There is a breathing issues and everything. But what leads to that? When we come back, when we go back and see, it's the burping technique that's not followed in the families at the end of the day. So that is one of the common questions that get asked regarding baby. And there are questions that are asked about ANC, like during the pregnancy, about their sex life. And also there are questions that are asked about the family planning and also the warning signs of the mother after delivery. So these are some of the common questions that get asked to us, and we answer all those questions. We have a gynecologist and we have MBBS doctors who are manning the system at the back end, who keeps answering these questions along with the nurses we have.
Thank you so much. Thanks for that. Varsha Chanda had asked a question to Lokesh. Unlike some evaluation approaches, outcome harvesting does not measure progress towards predetermined objectives or outcomes, but rather collects evidence of what has changed. Lokesh, do you want to take that up? How was an intervention then, contributing to the changes? How do you see it with this kind of a constraint?
Yeah, sure. Yes, I mean, as I mentioned in the presentation, right? It also measures unintended changes too, right? So it's based on your evaluation technique. I mean, what you consider as an outcome from your documentation process. I mean, you have a whole project period, then you document your results at every steps of your project. Based on those, you identify key results of your project key results of your project, and then you again go with your stakeholders to verify those, whether you agree with the results, the outcomes due to your project or not, because we have counterparts, like we have government stakeholders at the different levels. So we go with them, and based on those, there might be other unintended results beside those desired objective of the project. So we used to consider those results as our contribution to those results from our project. Yeah.
Right. And I think, so that's what you're saying, that that's also a learning for maybe the next set of interventions on,
Yes.
what was intended, what was unintended, and yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
you are
makes
right.
sense. Thank you. Thanks. There's since we have time, there's another one from Varun Kumar to Purnima. Purnima, what kind of challenges did you identify or address with regards to when you were engaging with the key stakeholders?
I have answered that question in the chat box, but if still
Okay.
needs to be reiterated, I am very much okay. But to save time, and if there are still other questions, I would like to give, prefer those would be answered. Still,
Sure,
if you
Purnima,
want to
I don't
answer, I
think
can
there's
answer
anything
because
else.
I've
I think
already
it'll be
listed it
great.
in the chat.
Okay, I think it'll be great if you address it here,
Okay.
and if
See,
there's
one of the
any
things
other
was
question, we can take it.
yeah.
Go ahead, Purnima.
Yeah, there were a lot of stakeholders, and one of the main challenges we faced was while dealing with the alcoholic patients. So the first thing was, the main issue was with their behavior itself, that they were not accepting the care from the caregivers, and counseling them was even a much more difficult task, where we had to work upon the caregivers rather than the patients there, because they were not in a situation to understand the importance of caring their own body and their own disease and all those things. So they were not even accepting their everyday meals or the medicines offered or the care that was offered to them. Now, another challenge was that who will look after the people who are migrated, because we worked in Bangalore and other districts, and it's a main hub for migrants. There were a lot of living alone patients who were migrated, who did not have caregivers. So we built the CBOs there, and that was a main always pricking us, what to do for them, who will take care of them. So then we thought of building the locally existing CBOs. We contacted them, we told our idea, and how grave is the situation of TB and how CBOs can play an important role. After that, we gave them a series of trainings on what are the issues pertaining and how they can support in their locality itself. So CBOs played a very good role in tackling TB in their areas, and they did a lot of awareness programs. They linked a lot of needy people with the services, and even during the COVID and all, they took care of TB patients in a very good manner. They even took tablets from the PHC and delivered to their homes, gave meals to the living alone patients, and they also addressed a few cases of stigma and discrimination with women TB patients. So these were some of the things that we work with the stakeholders. And there's a lot to tell. Maybe, we can even interact over email or.
Yeah, and which is why I'm insisting that if anybody wants to share their email IDs with and let the others know who you want to engage with, I think it'll be great learning for all of us to kind of take from here. There's another question for Victoria and Shirley from Sonal, which is does Noora Health have any plans to make the service inclusive for those who have limited literacy levels? Do you want to take that up, Victoria?
Yeah, sure. So yes, I had already also answered on the chat, but I am happy to tell it here again. So we don't only send text messages to the families. We also promote all the health behavior messages in the audio format and video format, and we also send them like visuals, having very limited text on the visuals for them to understand more better. We also have IVRSs for the specific conditions, so that people can listen to the recordings and they can be aware of the condition that they want to.
Thanks for that, Victoria. I think if there are any other questions and somebody from the audience wants to ask, the floor is open. Let us know. Otherwise, I can end the session. Are there any other questions, please? You can also raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask the question. There's a reason we are calling it SBCC Conversations and not really a summit. So feel free to converse with the presenters. Okay, so since there aren't any other questions, I would, if there's any query that you want to ask the presenters directly, everybody's, I think, left their email ID there. So, thank you so much. I just want to end the session then by thanking all the presenters and their contributions towards, the SBCC work. I think it's been very fascinating to hear you all. And of course, the audience, thanks for such an engaging session, for all the questions that you've asked. And looking forward to you all attending the other sessions as well over the next 2 days. Thank you so much. Thanks. Bye.